One of the biggest AI companies just shipped a brand new flagship model only 3 weeks after its last one and cut the price in half. The tools are getting faster and cheaper so quickly that even the people building them are racing to keep up. This is KnowFlo Daily. Good morning. It's Friday, August 14th, and here's what's on the front page. 4 quick ones, then we'll dig in. The surveillance firm Flock Safety says it's overhauling its nationwide car tracking network after a wave of scrutiny over police misuse. Flock runs about 120,000 cameras used by law enforcement across the country. Under the changes, officers will now have to enter a case number for every search, and every search gets automatically reviewed for unusual activity. Those were previously optional features, used by only about a third of Flock's 7,000 agencies. The company is also cutting its default data retention from 30 days down to 7, though departments can change that. It follows reports that at least 50 officers were accused, charged, or convicted of misusing plate readers to track people, including to spy on their partners. The White House put out a 25-page report accusing China of routing goods through more than 40 countries to dodge U.S. tariffs. The named countries include Mexico, Vietnam, Canada, India, and Japan, among others. The practice is called transshipment. Chinese goods get sent to a middle country where they're repackaged, relabeled, or lightly processed, then shipped on under a different country of origin so they qualify for lower tariffs. The report, from trade advisor Peter Navarro's office, entitled The Great Transshipment Scam, estimates the workaround costs the U.S. somewhere between $19 and $26 billion in tariff revenue every year. It's a window into just how much of a cat and mouse game global trade has become, where tariffs on one country simply push goods to travel a longer, more roundabout path to reach American shelves. Congo's Ebola outbreak has spread to a 6th province, and health officials now say it's on track to become the deadliest on record. Africa CDC said a person traveled from the town of Isiro to the city of Buta, where they died, bringing the outbreak to 6 of Congo's 26 provinces. So far, it has killed more than 2,100 people out of over 4,500 cases, with about 90% of cases concentrated in a single province, Ituri. The World Health Organization, which calls this the fastest growing outbreak yet, says there are still no approved vaccines or treatments available. To put the scale in perspective, the deadliest Ebola outbreak on record, more than a decade ago, killed over 11,000 people, and officials warned this one could surpass it. And Russian President Vladimir Putin made his first in-person visit to the disputed Kuril Islands, a chain claimed by both Russia and Japan. State media said he toured a fish processing plant, a hospital, and a school on Iturup Island, sampled local fish roe, and met with residents and the regional governor. Japan's foreign minister said Tokyo strongly protests the trip, calling the islands Japan's inherent territory both historically and under international law. The dispute over these islands has strained relations between Moscow and Tokyo for decades. Our top story this morning is the markets, where stocks are sitting near record highs heading into the weekend. Global stocks are hovering around record highs on Friday, with a broad world index up for a 3rd straight week. In Asia, the region's benchmark outside Japan is heading for a 2.7% weekly gain, its strongest run since mid-June, and Japan's Nikkei is on track to finish the week up more than 5%. The main driver here is inflation. A string of U.S. inflation reports this week suggested pricing pressure is staying under control, and that lowered the odds that the Federal Reserve raises interest rates at its meeting next month. Here's why that matters. When inflation cools, the Fed has room to hold rates steady, and investors cheer that because higher rates make borrowing more expensive and tend to weigh on stock prices. But there's a catch under the surface, and it's oil. Even with stocks rallying, crude prices are climbing. Brent crude rose to about $88.50 a barrel, on track for a 6% gain this week after the U.S. threatened to ramp up economic pressure on Iran, including extending a naval blockade. Faltering talks to end the war in the Middle East have added to that pressure. So the picture is a little split. The things investors watch most closely, inflation and interest rates, are pointing in a friendly direction, while energy costs are pushing the other way. And it's worth noticing what a 3rd straight weekly gain actually tells you. This isn't one good day, it's a trend, and it's holding up even with a hot war overseas and rising fuel costs in the background. The number to watch next is that Fed meeting. If inflation keeps easing, the case for holding rates steady, or even cutting later this year, gets stronger, and lower rates have been a big part of what's pushed these markets up. It's also a reminder that a market at record highs and a calm economy aren't always the same thing. Records get set fairly often when things are going well, and this rally is being powered by something pretty specific, the belief that the Fed is done raising rates. If that belief holds, the momentum tends to continue. If a future inflation report comes in hot, this is exactly the kind of run that can reverse quickly. For now, though, the optimism is winning, and stocks are closing the week on a high note. Now to our main stories, and it's a busy morning for tech and business. Let's start with the AI race, because it just sped up again. Google released Gemini 3.7 Flash on Thursday, replacing the 3.6 Flash model that only came out 3 weeks earlier. Google says the new version is better at coding and knowledge work, with improved tool use for its workspace apps and more accuracy on complex, multi-step tasks. It pointed to benchmark jumps, including one coding test that rose from about 34% to 44%. But the headline for most people is the price. Google set introductory pricing at 75 cents per million input tokens and $3.75 per million output tokens. That is half the starting price of the model it's replacing. And that's the pattern worth noticing across this whole industry right now. The models keep getting more capable and cheaper at the same time, which is unusual for any technology. There is one wrinkle, though. The workhorse Flash model keeps getting these rapid upgrades, but Google's bigger flagship, the 3.5 Pro model, is still delayed. So for now, it's the fast, cheap tier that's doing the heavy lifting, and the premium tier customers have been waiting on hasn't arrived. For anyone building products on top of these models, this pace is a double-edged sword. Cheaper and better is great for your costs, but a model that gets replaced every 3 weeks means you're constantly retesting your work against something new. The ground keeps shifting under everyone at once. Next, Apple. 3 people familiar with the matter say Apple has trained its own large language model built specifically for the China market, with support from the Chinese tech giant Alibaba. That's a real change of strategy. Apple had been leaning on outside partners' models to bring generative AI to iPhones in China, where US models like OpenAI's ChatGPT simply aren't available. And the timing is important. China's Cyberspace Administration registered Apple's generative AI service just last month, which clears the way for Apple Intelligence to reach Chinese iPhones for the very first time. Under that arrangement, Alibaba's Qwen model gets folded into the version of Apple Intelligence that ships on the iPhones, iPads, Macs, and Vision Pro headsets sold in China. Step back, and the bigger story is that global tech companies are increasingly building separate AI systems just for the Chinese market, shaped by local rules and local partners, instead of shipping one single product to the whole world. For a company like Apple, that's a huge operational bet on staying competitive in one of its most important markets, and it shows how much the ground rules for AI now change depending on which country you're standing in. Over to Wall Street, where a famous investor is making a comeback bet. Bill Ackman's Pershing Square disclosed a new stake in Netflix, returning to a stock he'd walked away from about 4 years ago. Back in early 2022, Ackman built a big Netflix position, then sold the entire thing about 3 months later, right after the company reported its first subscriber decline in more than a decade. This time, his firm argues Netflix has effectively won the streaming wars. It points to more than 325 million subscribers, nearly twice the combined base of Disney Plus and HBO Max. And the stock is a lot cheaper than it used to be, down roughly 50% from its June 2025 high, which puts it at about 21 times forward earnings. Netflix shares jumped nearly 4% after the disclosure. The lesson investors are chewing on this morning is an old one, but a hard one to actually follow. Sometimes the best time to buy a great company is right after it's fallen out of favor, when everyone else has given up on it. And Netflix wasn't the only move. Pershing Square added 5 other stocks in the same report, a sign the firm is putting fresh money to work after a cautious stretch. And here's a number that says a lot about the economy. Average pay for the CEOs of S&P 500 companies jumped 21% last year to $22.8 million. That's the highest figure since tracking began back in the 1990s. The data comes from the AFL-CIO, the largest federation of labor unions in the country. The gap between the top and everyone else is widening, too. The average ratio of CEO pay to worker pay climbed to 312 to 1, up from 285 to 1 the year before. And there's a wild card driving a lot of this, Elon Musk. His Tesla pay package, valued by the company at $158 billion, is so enormous that a labor official said corporate boards now use it as a reference point when they set other executives' pay. In other words, one giant package quietly pulls everyone else's numbers up. Fold Musk back in, and the average CEO to worker pay ratio balloons to more than 5,000 to 1. Numbers like these are exactly what fuel the long-running argument over executive pay, whether these packages reward the performance that built the company, or whether the pay has simply become detached from the workers who actually run it day to day. Time for the lightning round. Quick hits to get you caught up. OpenAI is replacing its chief revenue officer, Denise Dresser, after just 8 months on the job. She's being succeeded by a former Wiz executive as the company gears up for an IPO. It's part of a string of senior exits. A former chief operating officer left this week after 8 years, and several other top leaders have departed earlier this year. The cryptocurrency XRP briefly fell below $1 this week for the first time since 2024, dipping to 99 cents before recovering. That ended a streak of 635 straight days closing above $1. It's now down about 72% from its peak last July, as Ripple's own dollar-backed stablecoin chips away at what XRP was used for. Robinhood launched a second venture fund, raising $225.5 million in an IPO on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker RV2. The closed-end fund buys stakes in early and growth-stage private startups, with a particular focus on current and former Y Combinator companies. TikTok's U.S. security chief will testify before the House Select Committee on China on September 15th. It'll be the first time a TikTok U.S. executive has testified publicly since ByteDance finalized the deal to split the American app from its global business back in January. In the NBA, the Philadelphia 76ers will appear on national television 34 times next season, up from just 14, after landing LeBron James in free agency and trading for Jaylen Brown. That ties them with the Knicks, Lakers, and Spurs for the most national TV games in the league. They open October 20th against the defending champion Knicks in New York during the Knicks ring celebration. And finally, something a little lighter. McDonald's is launching its first ever energy drink, the Red Bull Dragonberry Energizer, at participating U.S. restaurants starting Sunday. It mixes Red Bull with blue raspberry syrup and freeze-dried dragon fruit and packs 80 milligrams of caffeine. There's a zero sugar version too, for anyone who wants the buzz without the extra sugar. That's the news for Friday, August 14th. Stocks near record highs on cooler inflation, an AI race that keeps getting faster and cheaper, and a surveillance company hitting the brakes on how police use its cameras. That was KnowFlo Daily. Sign up for your personalized newsletter at knowflo.io. News picked for you, your local news included, free.